to welcome all of you to the Mahasukha Center. I see a lot of people who haven't been here before, and that's great because we really wanted to do a kind of talk and a kind of music event that would allow us to share this beautiful space with people we know from other parts of our lives. And so I'm really happy to see you all here. And, please feel free to think of this as your center. Come back for yoga classes, meditation classes. Let us know how you found out and could come here so that we can reach you in the future. There's some sign-in sheets by the door. And we're going to get settled and start in just a minute.
Everything good there, Brian? We all sweet.
So we're just going to start with a little short meditation just to settle us into the space and really mark our intention of what we're doing here. And I'm going to put on the lapel mic as Ryan is desperately signaling me to do. So find a comfortable sitting position. If you're in a chair, put your feet on the floor or cross your legs in a meditation position on the chair like you're levitating. If you're on the ground, you want to think about your butt being nice and heavy on the cushion and your spine being tall and straight, like your head is lifting you up. Your chin is level with the floor, your shoulders are level. Your hands are relaxed somewhere where you can forget about them. And begin to breathe. Letting everything else fall away, your day, your life, the room, even your body. Just focusing in on your breath. And think about the way that you feel when you're under the influence of a beautiful piece of music. Whether you're out dancing in a club, or whether you're listening to a symphony orchestra, or just your favorite song miraculously comes on the car radio at just the right time. Get in touch with that sense of joy, of losing yourself in the music, in your own experience of the music. And see if somewhere in you, maybe you have a little bit of curiosity about how this is happening. How does music work on us? Where is this happiness and sense of freedom coming from? And with that sense of wonder and curiosity, just set your intention. See if you can find something in this class. A little bit of an answer to that question. Stay open. Stay relaxed. Lengthen your breath and open your eyes.
So thank you very much for coming this afternoon. My name's Darren, and I'm not really qualified to talk about music per se. I'm a DJ and producer, so I guess I'm qualified to play music because people seem to come to gigs, but not so much on the academic side of things. This is Claire, my partner and teacher, who's a yoga and meditation teacher and a massage therapist as well. And it's interesting, the qualifications for talking about music. I have an experiential aspect to what I'm going to talk about because that's how generally I come across my music. On terms of the Buddhist and yoga side, we've both completed the Asian Classics Institute 18 courses, the open courses and the 18 advanced courses. And so I guess we're qualified in that respect to talk about the Buddhist side of things. And on the yoga side, Claire's a yoga teacher, and we've also just come from the Classics of Yoga retreat with Lama Marut, which was amazing. So if you get a chance to see Lama Marut at all, you most definitely should, or to hear any of the amazing teachers at the Mahasukha Center here. Lama Lauren here is one of them. She's awesome. So yeah, if you do get that opportunity, take it. As we studied the courses, went through the Asian Classics Institute courses, it kept on coming back to me that music was such a beautiful metaphor for ultimate reality, for the thing we're trying to perceive. The goal of the path, in one sense, is to perceive directly in a non-conceptual way ultimate reality. And it kept on coming to me that music, in a way, exemplifies that beautifully, and we don't even realize it. It's in front of us all the time, in a similar way to what they call emptiness in Buddhism. And so what we wanted to do was draw some parallels between these basic concepts of Buddhism and music and use them to allow us to understand Buddhism and yoga and the concepts therein more effectively. Throughout history, the music has been a part of every authentic spiritual tradition, which is really interesting when you think about it as well. What is it about music that reaches people on that kind of level and allows people to transport their minds to this place? And whether it's the Sufi dancers in Egypt, which I saw years ago and is incredible, dropping into these deep trances and then spinning for 45 minutes on the spot. This aspect of music and dancing transports them to a different place. And our experience of it, especially for me and the people involved in my culture, we come across music in a club environment. And it's a very different thing in a way. You know, we're talking about big 40K rigs and this punishing sound and, you know, just relentless rhythms and the lights and the smoke. And, you know, it seems very different from a bunch of Gregorian monks sitting there, whoa, kind of. But there's a connection there. They're doing the same thing. And we're going to talk about it more later, but I found this out when I stopped drinking and drugging and started going to clubs straight, thinking it would be a pretty disappointing experience. And it was awesome. I found you can reach those same states without drugs, which I was very surprised to find. Yeah, so music somehow has this power to bring us into direct contact with some other reality, and it's kind of the point of the spiritual life is to transcend the ego, and that's a little about what we're going to talk about. There's an aspect of selflessness which you find in music. When you truly get lost in music, that's what you're losing, the sense of self. And it's very valuable and a very precious thing because of that. So it's mystical in that respect. It's also mystical in that it's temporal and fleeting and invisible. And, you know, it's like a phantom or a ghost, ineffable. You know, you have a piece of vinyl when you have a record or a CD, but that's not the music. You have an MP3 on your iPod player, but that's not the music either. So what is the music? What is music? You know, is it a thing or is it just change, flux, flow, something you're forced to be in the moment with? And that's something else about music that we're going to talk more about, the fact that when you are fully experiencing music, you're fully in the moment, not thinking about the neurotic thoughts of the past or the neurotic visualizations of the future, which is pretty much what we do 99% of the time, right? What did this person say to me? What did I say to them? Or what am I going to do? Who am I going to be at some point in the future? So it's the magic of music, you know. It can spark revolutions, inner, outer revolutions. It can divide or unite countries. Can unite the world. I mean, you'll remember the Live Aid concerts they had in the 80s and 90s. You know, I can't imagine that happening around sculpture or origami or something, right? Like the world's finest origami artists are going to meet in Hyde Park in London, and the world's going to unite around them with the power of folding paper. You know, it's just not the way it happens. And there's the aspect of the cliche of the universal language of music, which is so beautiful as well. That people who don't speak the same language can understand each other. There's something that unites us, that connects us with music. And, you know, you see that when you go to Thailand, and Bob Marley is everywhere. And no one really speaks English, you know. I mean, a lot of people do in the tourist spots, a lot of people outside that don't. And he should be up there with the other Thai Buddhist deities, I think, up there on the tongas, you know. Bob should be there as well, because he's definitely a high practitioner.
Say one meta.
Well, yeah, right, yeah. There's some quotes I had. Bob Marley was a high practitioner. One of the quotes that I had was Bob Marley saying, "I'm not Bob Marley. I don't know who I am yet." You know, again, this kind of aspect of non-self, of him as a high practitioner. And we're going to talk also about the aspect of music coming through musicians and artists. The idea that when you really are purely in the moment of creation, it's not you, and you know it's not. You can walk in the studio and pound your head against a tune for weeks and nothing can happen. Then one day you go in 3 hours this thing comes out. In fact, the singles of mine that have always done well have been exactly like that. It's really infuriating. You go in there going, "I'm a master at this. I can carve out anything I want from this," you know, from silence, essentially. That's another interesting aspect of music. You're carving from silence, creating this thing. But it's not the case. You're very aware as any kind of artist that it's not you. It's not you. So we're going to try and look at the connections between music, Buddhism, and yoga, and all of them have a academic aspect, if you like, and all of them have a practical aspect. Maybe physics is a little light on the practical aspect of music.
We experience physics all the time.
Yeah,
we're not thinking about
that's
it, but
true.
It's happening in the inner body things.
Yeah, not so much in terms of music, though, perhaps. Although in my research I found out that Brian May from Queen has a PhD in astrophysics. Right? That's pretty impressive. And there's a death metal techno band called The Physicists, but they don't really count, I don't think. So what is music, and how do we perceive it? Imagine a bucket with a pillowcase stretched across it. Then a bunch of people walk around it throwing ping pong balls at it. And they can throw as many as they like. They can throw them as often as they like. And your job is to work out who they are, who they're talking to, whether they're moving toward you or away from you, or whether they're static. And this is what your eardrum does when you're hearing something. So sound travels through air as vibrating molecules that impact the eardrum. And in a way, I guess you could say it's almost more a sense of touch than hearing, in a way, right? What's your eardrum actually receiving but impacting of molecules? The hearing side of it is interesting because it all happens on the other side of the eardrum. The information that arrives at the eardrum is undifferentiated in terms of identity, in terms of source. It's very difficult for the mind to actually work out what's going on. There's gaps in the information. It's very rarely a complete picture. Many different sounds have similar impact patterns on the eardrum. So when you're hearing music, for example, outside, and someone slams a car door, that car door could mask the snare drum of the music, the exact same frequency. So how does your mind know it's the car door and not the snare drum, or the snare drum? How does it know you're not slamming a snare drum or hitting a car door? You know, it doesn't, in a way. And this is the interesting thing. Your mind has to guess. So let's step back a bit. The impacts of these molecules on the eardrum are then taken into the mind, to the brain, and they're separated out and on a sort of by lower brain functions in terms of pitch, timbre, reverberation, and so forth. And then the higher brain functions produce a perceptual whole on the basis of these. But as I just spelt out to you, the picture is incomplete. In fact, Daniel Levitin, a psychologist from McGill University in Montreal, says the picture is almost never complete. What the brain does is creates a mental image of what it thinks is out there. And that's how you hear things. Based on your expectation, based on the habituation of what you heard before, you're going to hear according to that. In fact, Daniel Levitin these are his words, not mine, and I found this incredible. We assume that the world is just as we perceive it to be. Yet experiments forced researchers, including myself, to confront the reality that this is not the case. What we actually hear is the end of a long chain of mental events that give rise to an impression, a mental image of the physical world. Nowhere is this more striking than the perceptual illusion in which our brain imposes structure and order on a sequence of sounds to create what we call music. So this is a concept that Buddhism has been talking about, and yoga, for 2,500 years or more. The idea that what we're seeing out in the world, in this case what we're hearing, but hopefully if you've been to the other talks at the Arts Future, you'll realize that we're talking about all the senses now. That what we're perceiving in our minds is not what's out there. Even scientists are coming to recognize this now. It's an illusion based on our habituations. And our mind imposes the structure on the basis of molecules on membranes. That's it. Confused battering of molecules on membranes. We somehow create a perceptual whole out of that. So there's another concept in Buddhism that's very similar to this. It's called Chi Jedrak. And if any of you are at Geshe Michael's teachings the other day, he uses almost exactly the same language. I was sitting there just going, oh my God, because you hear him talking about the stuff and it sounds kind of crazy and tripped out, and we're just seeing mental images and there's a little picture this big in the back of my head. What is he talking about? You know? It's crazy. And then I read this, and it just made so much sense. Music, the image of music, the metaphor of music spelt it out so clearly that...
Like, just as an example, one of the studies that they were talking about in the Daniel Levitin book, they played a sentence to a number of people that said, the bill was passed by both the House and the Senate. How many times have we heard that on the radio or read that in the paper? And they took out different sections and just filled it with white noise, with static. People could report that they heard the whole sentence, and they could report that they heard the static, but they couldn't tell where the static was, because the brain had this perfect little picture of the bill was passed by both the House and the Senate from previous experience, that it just slapped on the syllables and decibels when the recording was played, and they couldn't even tell the difference between what was out there, what the actual syllables were saying versus where the static was, and what they had put on it for their own mind. And we are doing that all the time on many levels, not just, I mean, as we were talking about before, with all our senses too.
Yeah, so the point is we're bringing at least something to the equation, but how much? Come in and sit down if you, any way you can find a space. Come in, sit down. Anyone out there, come in, sit down. Hey, Henry. Henry's been chilling with Drake at the VMAs this afternoon, but he's come here to join us instead. Yeah!
We
also have Henry to thank for that very, very big
Yeah, we
speaker.
do. Which we're going to give you a little blast on very soon. So the point is, there's no objective reality out there. There's just our subjective impression of it. Which again, Buddhism and yoga have been saying for anywhere between 2.5, I guess you'd say, with Buddhism, to maybe 5,000 or 6,000 years with yoga. So we're going to try and get a sense of that through the metaphor of music, and we're going to start thinking about these things in terms of sound, but move on to how we perceive everything in our world and why we perceive them the way we do. Daniel Levitin talks about this habituation. The process of habituation is a very familiar concept in Buddhism as well. You could call it cause and effect, that something we're previously been habituated to forces us to see that same thing, to see the world in the same way again. Which is exactly how Daniel Levitin talks about the way that we fill in the sounds and music. So we call that karma in Buddhism. It's a very important concept, especially when you're talking about emptiness. Things are empty of having the qualities that we see in them. There's no music out there. If an alien came to Earth that didn't have the mind that we have, that perceives things and groups things, imposes structure the way that we do, it wouldn't hear music. You know, a dog doesn't hear the same frequencies that we do. I could write a concerto for you for sub bass and dog whistle, and you wouldn't hear any of it. So is it out there? Does it exist? I'd have to design it all on spectrometers, but you could feel a sub bass. We're going to show you about that in a little bit. But yeah, it's very interesting. So is it not there because we can't perceive it? On one level, maybe. So we're going to talk about this idea of emptiness and karma and how they inform each other. It's very important. So another way that we talk about music is in the way that it's changing. It's changing from moment to moment. And our minds are also changing from moment to moment. These moments of change are put together in our minds to create a continuum of music out there. Our mind has to be changing to cognize the changes in the music.
And the mind as well is putting together the different parts of music. So what makes a tempo? It's not any one moment where there's a particular beat. It's our mind stringing together over time something that's happening in the moment with something that happened a regular interval before, something that we expect to happen then next. And it's the same with the idea of finding what the key of something is in by hearing a melody, hearing the different notes, or being able to tell things like what are the words of a song. You know, we're hearing lyrics that are put together from just syllables that are happening over time. And it's another way of showing the involvement of our mind, that there isn't like a music that's been put together by a construction company that's been sort of delivered whole to us in one moment, that it's this active process of our changing mind and the changing music coming together and creating something.
Our mind takes the constituent parts of music and creates a perceptual whole from them. You could say our mind takes the moments of the beats, the tempo of the music, and creates them into a continuum. It's a really interesting thing to think about as well, as why is organized sound so appealing to us? If I push a drum set down the stairs, you're probably not going to like the sound it makes. But I can take those same sounds and organize them differently, and they sound pleasing. In fact, they make you want to get up and dance. Sorry.
I'm doing my dissertation on this sort of thing, and from a neuroscience standpoint, when there is a beat and it has a certain cadence, tempo, the type of music, whether it's song or instrument or drum, that soothes people and lowers anxiety, it has the same all those components as a mother's heartbeat.
Oh, so
there
that's a
is that-
habituation.
this is
That's a really
calming
strong
music,
one.
Not, up and, get
Mm.
dancing music, but they've shown that that tempo they scientifically.
Mm.
So it makes sense that.
There's a strong habituation
Yeah,
right there of being used to that rhythm in the mother's
It's very
womb.
specific, where it's at.
I think we continue to feel that
Yeah.
each day.
Yeah.
We're still feeling our own heartbeat.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
a constant vibration inside of us.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a comforting habituation as well. So it would have a similar result, like they would say with karma, the cause would then have a similar effect. So we're not going to be upset by something that sounds like what we felt when we were, safe and happy in the womb or something like that. So it really does make sense. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Yeah.
So this continual process of change happening over time, it gets at the fundamental Buddhist concept of impermanence. And we think things are static. We think things are staying the same, even if for a short amount of time. And it causes us a whole lot of grief in our lives. Probably most of the grief that we have in our lives is thinking that people and things won't change. People especially. That causes a lot of pain. And if we really understood the nature of how things did exist, it would be far less of a problem for us. I'm not saying we should harden our hearts, that this kind of teaching should harden our hearts, but we'll have more wisdom about the way things are and what to expect in the future. So we're going to do a little meditation now on change. So if you'd like to take a comfortable position again. For those of you who are not meditators, you can have if you're sitting in a chair, just put your feet flat on the floor. It's good. And thank you, love. So they say in the yoga texts, your feet or legs crossed in lotus or half lotus, or any lotus is fine too. Your back straight. Your head like an apple on top of a stack of coins, supported nicely there. Head neither forward nor back, the shoulders neither one higher than the other. Your head, neck and jaw relaxed. Your eyes either shut or slightly open if need be. I find it much easier shut. And your tongue just against the roof of the palate at the front of your mouth. Just take some deep breaths. Make the breath long and fine, they say in the text. So does music change? Without change, there wouldn't be what we call music. Rhythm, tempo, melody, arrangements are all ways of talking about change. Even the most unmusical pieces of avant-garde music change in that they are a progression over time. We literally couldn't hear something that didn't change. The molecules would never reach the membranes of our eardrums. Music gives us this clue as to how things do exist. So what about me? What about the self I think I have? Does it change? In Buddhism we talk about the concept of an unchanging limited self. The limited self is the problem to enlightenment, one of the problems of getting to enlightenment. So let's have a look at the parts of me, of the self that I think I have, the body and the mind, and try and get some reality on whether they're changing at all. What about our body? Is this changing? Of course, it must. On a gross level, we grow from infancy to childhood, to teenage years, to adulthood, growing, changing all the time. The body is in continual motion, either growing or dying, but never unchanging. Science tells us that on a subatomic level, that everything in our world is changing inconceivably fast. Some particles oscillating between matter and antimatter 3 trillion times per second. So fast we can't even comprehend that change. So where is the thing that is changing if we're changing that fast? Even our own scientists are telling us that there's nothing but change. Flux. Just like music. Just change. Music we perceive as an ephemeral dance of change. And the molecules that stimulate that are just the same. Infinite regress into change. And at some point just energy, just waves of energy. There's no things really, just change. What about our mind? Let's look at some of the parts of the mind. How about our opinions or feelings? Do these change? Did you ever think Phil Collins was cool? Or Bon Jovi maybe? We don't like to admit it sometimes, but we all go through changes in our phases of development, not only musical taste, but in our opinions and feelings about everything in life. This never stops. Our mind is always changing. What about memory? Does that change? Say we heard AC/DC's Back in Black for the first time when we were 8 years old. Do you think we remember that experience in the same way now as when we experienced it as an 8-year-old? Do you think we can even remember that event in the same way with the filter of our present mind? The past is never like it was. The only way we can see our past is through the lens of the present mind. If there is an unchanging film of what actually happened somewhere in our mind, we can't access that. They change a little every time we think about them. Our memory surely changes, and the rest of our mind too. So like music, the parts of the self, the body and mind, are nothing but change. Just flux, just flow. In fact, the only thing that doesn't change is change itself. So there's no self the way we think of it, this unchanging, static, immutable self. But on the other hand, there could be no self if it wasn't for change. Change makes the idea of a self possible, the self we do have. According to Buddhism and yoga, that's all the self is, an idea of a self. Like music, continually changing, a mental image. And that's good news for all of us. Because the self is just a changing idea, like music is just a changing idea, a mental image. It is possible for it to function perfectly, to bring us the experiences it does. And if we can harness the energy that creates these changes, it puts us in a very powerful position. It's not that I don't exist at all. It's not that there's no self at all. Just not in the way we think there is, in the way that makes us unhappy, unchanging, a stuck self, limited self. The self we do have is this amazing dance of perpetual motion, movement, an expression of pure potential. If we can harness this energy, our evolution is literally unlimited. In Buddhism we say, understanding this idea of change is key to achieving nirvana, perfection, enlightenment. So from one perspective, when you hear a beautiful piece of music that moves you to tears, or one that moves you to climb the speaker stack and rock out from on top of the bass bins, you're hearing the sound of your own future enlightenment. So just lengthen the breath a little now and relax and wiggle your fingers and toes if they've gone to sleep. Open your eyes.
So, why is this important to understand the changing nature of ourselves and everything? Because we do have the ability of directing this change. We can see that the world is not out there objectively and we're not just sort of bumping into it. That we have a certain amount of agency that's provided by our perspective. We're completely trapped in our own subjectivity. There is no world out there for us outside of our subjective idea of the world. And so if with things like meditation, with yoga, with thinking about change in the ways that the world is working, we can start to change this lens that we have to see everything through. We can actually experience a more beautiful world. So syllables and decibels coming at us could appear like friendly words from a friend instead of someone trying to start a fight. Or we could be living in a quiet and beautiful place instead of next to the 405, all the way up to, the way that this affects our relationship with every object in our world and the people that we care about, seeing a world that has less suffering in it. So, one way to do this is to start working now for the future. Create the kind of environment for other people around you that you want for yourself, whether that be the sonic environment or through your kindness, through your giving, through your actions to them. We'll talk a little more about that at the end. And another way is to try in the moment to do your best to put the best subjective state of mind on whatever situation comes up. when we get ready to go to work in the morning, sometimes we're bringing this mind with us that's saying, okay, this is going to be ordinary, this is going to be crappy, someone's going to say something to me, or there's probably going to be traffic. When we pay, $30, $50 for a ticket to a dance party and we're getting ready to go out, our mind is going, this is going to be great, I'm going to see so-and-so, this is totally going to be worth it. There's so many songs about this, like basically all the hip-hop dance floor, anthem, tonight's going to be a good night, and it's the freaking weekend, baby, I'm going to have me some fun. It's all about yes, it's finally Saturday, and that's about taking a subjective state of mind with you as you go out into the world. It doesn't necessarily mean that so-and-so isn't going to cut you in front of you in line at coat check, but it might mean that you're able to see that with a kinder heart, and it's not going to spoil your night. You could, I think, didn't I lose my cell phone the night we met? It was the happiest time I've ever lost my cell phone. You know what I mean? I was whatever. So, these things, what we're bringing to the situation, we're talking about music as a metaphor, but this is about what we bring to every situation that we're in every relationship. If we realize that everything is in flux and things aren't, fixed, even when that apparently negative moment comes up, it's not well, that's the way the entire night's going to be right now. You can just sort of let it roll off you. I'm changing, it's changing. I'm going to roll the dice again and see what happens in the next moment. And in this way, we can take these ideas with us as we walk around in the world. It's not just about sitting in meditation. Which brings us to our next topic about what exactly is happening with the live music experience, especially when you go out dancing or when you go and you're with a group of people all listening to a concert together. Why is that so transporting? What's happening to our minds? What's happening to our bodies when that happens?
Yeah. So I was going to approach it one way, but I'm going to try something different. Thank you, my dear. Who's had some kind of peak experience on music? You can imagine what I was going to say before. Yeah. Okay, in a sentence or two, anyone? Julian, I saw you raise your hand. Give me a brief description of that, or even a couple of words or a feeling, just as a
unity.
Unity. Yeah, awesome.
Performers and with everybody around.
Yeah, with everyone around you. Anita, I know you have. I've seen you out. And that's without drugs.
Complete lost sense of self, letting go of my ego completely.
Awesome. So a loss of sense of self. Vibration. Yeah. Whole body vibration. Energy.
Sometimes I get a sense of creation, you're actually, as a group, you're making something.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Love and connection with higher source.
Love and connection with a higher source.
Safe.
Safe, yeah. Yeah, awesome.
Seeing the interrelatedness between the past, future, and present.
Wow, awesome.
I want what just happened.
Go speak to your dealer. Connectedness, yeah.
Ecstasy and lightness.
Ecstasy and lightness.
All heaviness of having a body.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome.
Breaking through barrier. Breaking through barrier. Feeling
Yeah, breaking through barriers. Yeah, awesome. Anyone over that side of the room? Yeah, brother?
I like the feeling of what he said about vibrations, but how you can feel the vibrations of the music connect the vibrations of everything around you at the same time. How everything's vibrating and it's all connected by that vibration.
Yeah.
In a really ecstatic way.
In a really ecstatic way, exactly, yeah.
Ecstatic way.
I would say
Sorry,
that
come back.
a sense of community,
Yeah.
that it's not just the community that you're experiencing the music with, but you're also experiencing something that communities way in the past have experienced at the same time.
Yeah.
Connecting the community through time.
Yeah, connecting through time.
Peter's involved with the symphony orchestra, so in that case, like, yeah, you get that historical, and I think with like music from the 60s or whatever, we have that feeling as well, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you do with rave music as well, with electronic music. I mean, the early days of rave music, that connectedness, the sense of community of just going out, and it's like, you know, on many different levels. On a gross level, it's kind of you against the police, you know. So there's you, and you know, everyone's running around the M25 waiting for that phone call. You know, back in the day, in the beginnings of the rave scene, there was no cell phones, so you're just kind of, you know, checking into a petrol station, a gas station, you say here, and just calling up this one number, and someone gets the call, and then away they go. And there could be a 100-car convoy heading out to some spot in the middle of the forest, you know. That's pretty uniting as well, you know, on that level. And then there's being in the music, that sense of unity that you feel, connectedness with you all out there in that space, enjoying this, you know, that experiencing the same thing. Are you experiencing the same thing though? Something that's worth thinking about. Yes?
I was going to say reciprocity. Like
Reciprocity.
You get, like, the more you dance,
Yeah.
like, the more you feel like
Yeah.
satisfied by what music makes.
The more you give, the more you get.
Yeah, yeah, big time.
I think too, you can be present in that moment and like shed what you were talking about before and said differently, like what's been happening in your life.
Yeah.
Thinking ahead, back, you're right
That
there.
whinging voice in the back of our head going, yeah, you haven't done this, you should be doing that.
Yeah.
Meh.
What I was going to say was loss of control, which is the same thing. You aren't controlling it. It
Yeah.
takes you, like you say, when you can't help it. You just have to dance.
Flow, yeah. Last night Mira's dance class was awesome like that, seeing people move spontaneously without any point. It was just beautiful. How often in our society do we move without a purpose, except through dance?
Yeah, they say dance it's a complete practice because it's an end into itself. You're not dancing like to get something, or you're not dancing as a part of a process to reach somewhere else. It is itself.
What was the quote? If I could tell you about, if I could tell you why I dance, I wouldn't have to dance. So that sums up beautifully. So those are all.
Great, they covered a couple of pages.
They're way better descriptions than ours, but I'll run through some of the ones that occurred to me. You know, the experience of merging and becoming the music was one that people didn't say, that I feel very strongly in that situation. And there's also that feeling of intense love for everyone else. And I'll mention drugs briefly, just because you can't not talk about drugs and music. It's like the elephant in the room, right? When you're talking about feeling ecstasy with music, you know, ecstasy. You know, and that was the driving force of the drugs in the late 80s and early 90s, and throughout the 90s and probably most of the 2000s as well, with the electronic dance music scene. But it's not, what people are looking for is not the drug high. They're looking for that connectedness. They're looking for that unity. They're looking for that wholeness, for the oneness that you feel. You know, community is one level of it, but it's more than that. It unites the parts of yourself somehow into a greater whole. There's also the sense, even when you see kids on drugs when they're out, and I know from when I was a kid on drugs, that, you know, when you see these kids, they're out there, and as the night warms up and the journey progresses through the night, you just see the state change in them, and the state of mind changing. And at a certain point of the night, when they're just in there and immersed into the music, they exhibit these really interesting, grab a seat wherever you like, brother, really interesting ideas that are reflected as very positive qualities in the Buddhist and yogic texts, interestingly enough. The sense of feeling this openness and connectedness, wanting, you know, you've got a bottle of water in your hand, someone looks like they need a drink, you're just like, bam, you'll hand it over in two seconds, you know. You want everyone to be as happy as you are, to be ecstatic like you are. Right? It's a beautiful feeling, and we don't have that feeling very often most of the time in our lives. You want to show that affection to everyone as well. And Claire's going to talk a little more about the idea of that within yoga and the
Well, just for people who've studied the yoga texts or Buddhism, it's the four immeasurables that they talk about. When we were sort of writing about what this dance floor experience is like for us, the four immeasurables are infinite love, infinite compassion, infinite equanimity, or, you know, expanding these among everyone, and infinite joy, like wanting everyone to reach the highest level of joy. And, you know, when you get to that point and if there's the same rhythm that's moving the whole group of people, and everyone's been together sometimes for hours at that point, and there's this feeling of feeling connected to everyone around you, which can be called love, being willing to take care of someone. If you see someone throwing up in the bathroom, or if someone's cold, you might lend them a sweater, like this sense of compassion of like, you've got to get everyone, through this party together. And I've produced a lot of parties, so I'm always like, one of the major highs of the party is to run around and just make sure everyone has everything they need. And then infinite joy, wanting to lift everyone up to the highest state, which I think, is the ultimate goal of what the DJ is trying to do. And then this equanimity where you're not, when you look out across the sea of people dancing, you're not going, I'm so happy that those people are happy, but I'm not that happy that those people are happy. It's just this sense of like, we're all in this together. And that's, they say in the Yoga Sutras, you must use kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Learn to keep your feelings in balance, whether something feels good or whether it hurts, whether something is enjoyable or distasteful. This practice makes the mind bright and clear as pure water. So when you have these thoughts in your head, things aren't hitting you as like, oh, that's good, but that's bad, or something happens and you don't want to focus on it as negative. It brings your whole level of consciousness up. And you're experiencing things when you're in that moment. Everything's coming through those filters of love and compassion, I think, in my experience.
Yeah, and just in addition to the drug thing, because I mentioned it, I don't want to leave you the impression that I think that's the only way to get there. And I found that out very clearly, as I said, when I stopped drinking and drugging way before I came on this path. I realized that as a DJ, it's kind of like a hazard of the job, if you know what I mean. So you've got to put a lid on it at some point, or there's a slide that happens after that I see very often in our industry. But it's kind of like a product of our fast food culture, fast everything culture, that we want to have that connected, deep, amazing, uniting, ecstatic, experience in half an hour.
Yeah.
Come on, get over it. You see, look at the oldest library in the world, the caves in South Africa, and what did they feel that was important to inscribe on those caves? It was dancing. It wasn't how many cows they had out in the field, or it wasn't material possessions. It's this ecstatic experience of dancing themselves close to God, whatever you want to call it, to truth, to ecstasy. And it doesn't take drugs to do that. And in my experience, just, for what it's worth, as someone who was pretty good at it at the time, from a Buddhist perspective, we would say the karma for having that ecstatic experience runs out at some point. The scientific understanding is that we run out of serotonin. We use up all our serotonin, so we literally lose the ability to be happy.
Yeah.
And, that's a bummer. I've seen people like that. It's not nice, you know what I mean? And also the come downs just get horrible, It's like, days and days, that deep depression afterwards and stuff. So you can kind of get there quick if you want, but it's not sustainable, and you can't choose when to do it if you don't have drugs on you. And it's kind of a similar problem with our fast food culture. So that's my impression of it, for whatever you take it as you will. So I want to talk about the ways you can lose yourself in music. And from my perspective, there's two kinds of music. There's, for this particular purpose, it's not good and bad music, by the way. And the type I like is good music. The type people who don't agree with me like bad music. There's the kind of like trance and house music, and if you're not familiar with that, it's all that stuff with the boo doo 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 doo, like a jackhammer. No, if you like it, I'm sure you know. And that sort of, there's a lot of high and mid frequencies in that, and the journey is this long sort of meditational journey. And I've had some great peak experience on that, beautiful music like that out at times in the past, and with any kind of music, like 20% of it is good and 80% of it is so maybe. And the journey with that music in terms of losing yourself seems to be this long journey where every big, what seems like 15-minute drum roll that they have in the breakdown at every one of those tunes notches you up to another level. And then you sort of marching on that level and just shedding away more layers of the self. And then the next breakdown happens, and that big drum roll comes in. And the synths come in. Kind of right. And it's like the prana comes in from the yoga perspective. The prana comes into the central channel, you'd say, you know, and you're just not thinking about you. You're not thinking about the neurotic thoughts that we have. You know, the ego's not nattering away in the background saying, that person's got the same sneakers as you. Oh, you know, my bum look big in this dress or whatever, you know. It's like, you're just in it. You're in it. You're in the music, and everything else is gone. All you feel are these beautiful, beautiful adjectives that you were using before. You know, this connectedness, this loss of self, this vibration, this energy, creation, and so forth. So that's one of them. That's the highway, if you like, and I don't mean high as in high. And then there's the low way, through bass music, which is my preferred medium, and I was trying to find out what bass did to you from some of the spiritual texts, and then I didn't find very much at all. And then I realized that the frequencies that we use in our music just haven't been around for that long. I mean, when you hear this crank up in a minute, you'll know what I'm talking about. I mean, you see I thought maybe there was a connection between those Tibetan monks with those massive big horns with
Subharmonic singing as well.
Yeah,
and their own bodies.
Totally, yeah.
They don't seem to write about it; they just do it. So.
And there's a few references, like in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it talks about the sounds that are associated with some of the latter stages of perceiving emptiness directly. One of them is a sonic boom. Geshe Michael describes it like an 808 kick drum. Right? That was, you know, somewhat of a connection. But I couldn't find a whole lot, and I think the frequencies that we're dealing with are unique to this time. So all I can do is give my personal experience of it. I was speaking to Kevin before about it, and he was saying he felt it was sort of real lower chakra kind of, you know, this grounding energy in there, right? And my experience of it is something like that, more that the bass kind of just shakes the prana up, shakes the energy up in you. It moves that stuck energy that we have, maybe from sitting on a computer for 8 hours a day like this, you know. And it just gets all, kind of like dancing that does in general, or that yoga asana does, like the, you know, the postures of yoga do. And then the music almost uniformly goes like this. Drum intro, which you guys don't hear because the DJ's mixing it in over the tune before. Then the bass drops, and the inner body like this for a couple of minutes. And then the beats stop and the bass stops. And you get some sort of ethereal, beautiful noises, washes of synths or something like that. And I see people, when that stops, they're like, shh. And they just sort of, it's like a shavasana after doing asana, right? And you're just like, yeah, focus and bring that energy in. There's a build-up for another couple of minutes, right? Energy's shaking up again. And it's just kind of like that. It's just like the bass is just hammering that energy up, mixing around, and you sort of bring it in and focus it, and then you shake up more of that stuck energy. And the idea of yoga, which Claire's going to talk about, is bringing the energies, the winds, the prana, they say, into the central channel. David, I didn't ask you, and I meant to, sorry. On Ableton right now, on the top left-hand corner, is a clip called Sub Bass. If you could put the the main mixer volumes up to unity, or a little higher maybe. So this is the kind of, if you haven't experienced a club environment where you have really heavy bass, I often play this very thing. Sorry David, 1 second. You found it though, right? The grey one at the top left? I play this in my sets often, and toward the end, and I see it in people. They just, first of all, they go, "Why is he playing one bass tone? This is stupid." And then I just keep playing it, and after a while, people are like, and the one I use is not a straight tone. It's this. It oscillates from maybe like 300 hertz, which you've got no idea what that is, I'm sure, but it's kind of like, which is quite low still, a male voice at about that level, down to about 20 hertz, which is way lower than most people can. I mean, they say human hearing gets you can hear tones at 20 hertz, but not really, you know. Anything lower than 30 or 40, you can't really detect the tone in the human ear anyway. And it just goes down and then up again, and then down again. So it's kind of, I see it as like, it's almost like washing people, washing their inner body, washing their prana, cleaning them, do you know what I mean? And David will let it off now and just sit in a position now, like a meditative position, just close your eyes and just relax and just think about the energies in your body.
And try to really feel and not just listen as well. And we'll talk about that when we're done. So maybe you felt that in different parts of your body, and it's something that I think we'd like to explore a little more, because sometimes here where we're sitting it's a little confusing because we're on sort of a hollow thing. But when you're standing in front of the speaker, and he does that during his sets, a lot of people were able to feel it actually going up and down the chakras. Yeah. And I think that also it's interesting that different substances in this room were vibrating at different parts of the frequency. You know, so you can think about that must be happening with different areas of our physical body, with different areas of our, you know, psycho-emotional body or whatever. You know, what it's hard to really know what exactly those connections are, but it's enough to know that we do feel them. And I think it's a really great, like I see people having this visceral experience of, I'm changing 3 trillion times a second, you know, when we're standing right in front and Darren's playing and we're like standing and the bass is just like at the show at the Music Box in LA, Julian and Vanita and I were down front. There was so much bass we couldn't even hear what song he was playing, but we wouldn't leave. We were just like, ah! And I'm just like, okay, every cell in my body is vibrating right now. I'm getting completely rearranged. And so where is the me? Where is the solid me that's not moving, that's not changing, that's not being affected by music, you know? And I think it's an amazing teaching when you're on the dance floor, you know? And also, the repetitive beat, it's kind of like a mantra. Like we talk about mantras a lot in Tibetan Buddhism, and if you are saying, you know, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum over and over, you can't have a thought come in on top of that says, you know, I feel really self-conscious right now, or, you know, that feels like I wonder if I'm going to be able to pay my rent. For that time when you're saying mantras, if you're actually able to focus on them, you're in this just beautiful repetitive state with how your mind is cycling, and it's not flying to the past or to the future. And I think there's something very unifying when everyone in the dance floor is just being hit over and over with this sort of deafening, repetitive beat. You can't have a thought. You also can't, like, manifest your neurotic voice by saying to your friend, like, I feel really self-conscious right now. You know what I mean? Like, because they can't hear you. So I think it just has this, it's like this freeing, it's like a vacation from our own minds.
And that's one of the goals of yoga and meditation as well, you know, being able to find ways outside of that situation to get those breaks from the sort of nagging, what we call like audio karma. You know, this is who you are, this is what you're doing, narrating your whole life all the time. It's sort of like it's rearranging your cells and rewiring your brain. Oh yeah, and I was going to talk about yoga a little bit. That in yoga, extreme happiness and extreme wisdom are considered to be indivisible. So when we talk about reaching these 4 infinite thoughts, when you're just having this experience of ecstasy, chemically induced or not, on the dance floor, you're perceiving what could be considered a very true interconnectedness to all beings. You're having this feeling of universal compassion, which is a very true thought. And we talk about that as all the prana that sort of flows every which way and gets kind of stuck in different areas of our body, collecting and moving towards the center. So the feeling that you get is of being centered, of being grounded, and I like the idea of lightness, not heaviness. So there aren't obstructions happening in your body. Like sometimes you feel like you're moving like water on the dance floor, you know, like you're defying the laws of physics. And this is like a rearrangement of prana like we try to get through our yoga practice. So this extreme feeling of happiness and interconnectedness are really the same thing. Happiness for ourselves and a sense of connectedness with others. So this brings us to how can we have this experience all the time?
Yeah, I see people trying to reach this experience every weekend at the office. And you know, as I said before, some people use MDMA, ecstasy, to get there, and in the long run it's actually just easier to have a good meditation practice. Do you know what I mean? Allow that single-mindedness. You can get into that zone much more quickly when you're out, if you're able to focus your mind efficiently. So there's a good reason to start a meditation practice if you haven't already. I know from when I first went out, without drinking or drugging, that I felt very uncomfortable at first. I didn't know whether it would work or whether it was even achievable, these kind of peak states. And there used to be a classic techno night. I'm a closet techno fan. Don't tell anyone. And it was called Lost. Right? And it was Terry Francis, right? Is that his name, the techno? Yeah, Terry Francis. Is oh boy, he's putting it on me now. I don't know about techno music. That's for big wusses. And Terry is one of a group of guys from the Wiggle crew, they were called, from Croydon, from deep South London. And they had this proper techno night in London. It used to be in warehouses for a long time, just illegal raves and stuff. You remember them? Yeah, they're awesome, right? And then they moved it to a club in the centre of London, and it was, I think, the first night they did there. So I went along to that, and I kind of didn't call any of my mates or anything, because I just felt a bit like, what are they just going to be like, why are you not drinking? Why are you not, you know? And not that they all did, but it's just kind of like the assumption, you know, and I just wanted to kind of try it out for myself. So I went out and you know, deep, proper techno is very minimal. You know, with trance, for example, there's huge cues as to when the beat's going to come back in. It's this 2-minute drum roll that gets louder and louder, and these big, you know, you just know when the damn thing's going to drop. Like, you can be a musical, you know, ignoramus and still know what to do with trance, you know. But this kind of techno is really subtle. It's just this kind of repetitive beat, and little noises just come in and out. And so I went in, turned up, you know, 10 o'clock, not drinking, not doing anything else, so I may as well get on the dance floor. So I'm on the dance floor and hearing these sounds and just feeling a bit stupid, to be honest. Just kind of, you know, there's pounding beat there, and there's people kind of, you know, jumping on the dance floor a bit, but everyone's kind of hanging out. The club fills up, and to cut a long story short, because I think we're running out of time a little bit, the time just flew by. I found it was 2 or 3 in the morning, and it seemed like 15 minutes. Well, it seemed like half an hour or something. And I remember just these heavy, pounding beats. And without all these cues to come in to let you know what's happening, it's kind of like this mind meld happens with all the ravers around you, you know, and especially all the kids on drugs. There'll be a tiny just resonance of a hi-hat coming in the background. Just getting louder. Everyone's just like hands in the air. Something else has happened other than you know. Whoa! About 4 in the morning, I caught myself hearing this hi-hat, and I was like, whoa! And everyone else was like, whoa! And I was like, oh my God, I feel high. This is ridiculous. I feel off my head, you know. And I found that you can reach those states. It just takes longer. You got to get on the dance floor earlier, and you do it the proper way, the old school way. Is that you dance yourself into that space, dance yourself into unity, into connectedness, into this wholeness that music can take you to. So it's, in addition to what I said about drugs before, it can be done in other ways, and I wasn't depressed on Wednesday either, so it was brilliant. My yoga asana, I think, helped as well. At that point I was doing a lot of yoga asana, and I think that the whole thing of loosening up your inner body as well allows you to achieve that experience quicker and more fully. Union, yoga, another translation of yoga is union. There's many translations actually. You know, there's nada yoga. Has anyone heard of that? Nada yoga, the yoga of sound. Of course, Rebecca has. Yeah, and you as well. Yeah, it's like the yoga of sound, right? Yeah. You could translate that as using sound to make you whole. Union, wholeness, right? And it's very much what the club music does if you approach it with the right mindset. If we approach it with the right mindset, it will connect us with our world. It's the understanding of how music exists, that truly, the wisdom of how music actually exists, that really allows us to reach these states. You know, unraveling the mystery of sound, lifting the veil on ultimate reality through music. And you can do it the hard way of like, you know, banging your head against the selflessness teachings and the emptiness teachings of you know, the Buddhist schools, which are amazing as well. They're very important to know too. Or you can just go and rave out on the dance floor. And it does the same thing, but it's much harder to go there, though, if you don't have the wisdom behind it when you're not on the dance floor. So understanding how music exists and how it can change you, the understanding of music will change you, not the music itself. The change that music creates in you in a club environment is temporary. The understanding of how music exists as a changing thing and so forth will allow you to achieve that state anytime, ultimately. And all the time, they would say in the text, ultimately, that is enlightenment in a way, an aspect of it. So Claire's going to talk to us about the Yoga Sutras and the point of
It's
yoga.
actually after 5, so I'm going to talk to you about very little, because I think we really want to do some music. We want to experience this. But I'm going to kind of, you know, play bad cop here to his good cop and say, you know, we're tasting these experiences through ecstatic dancing, and we can always have that as part of our practice. But to really transform yourself, it helps to know what's going on, to see yourself treating others with kindness, not just in that one peak hour on Saturday night. To find a teacher, a spiritual teacher who can help you know where you individually need to be on your path, to learn to have a meditation practice, to have something that you can do daily, whether it's dancing or whether it's yoga. I mean, the point of yoga is to bring us to these states. The point of yoga is ecstasy. So it's a little bit more of a slow process and a commitment to a daily yoga practice than popping a pill and waiting half an hour, but it's something that we can have our whole life. So it's a natural transition, I think, from those of us who, you know, found this state partying to then saying, you know, I'm getting a little bit older now. I want to feel good, but I just can't stay up that late all the time. Like, and we have this like 2,500-year-old, more in the case of yoga even than Buddhism, traditions that we can go to that can show us how to reach these experiences. You know, it's not talked about a lot, but the ultimate goal of Buddhism is ecstasy as well. I know Buddhism has a lot more of a sort of, you know, kind of conservative and, you know, it's very important about keeping your ethics and doing your meditation, but the ecstasy that you find in those meditations, when you're doing the same thing, when you're bringing the energies into the center, when you're losing that neurotic voice in your mind, when you're losing yourself in service to others, is this same kind of feeling. And you can have it all the time. Just takes a little practice. We were tying this in with the idea of plur. Actually, W, who's here, was like, this sounds just like plur. So peace, love, unity, and respect, right? As like this sort of tenets of the dance music community. And peace, what is that but patience and finding stillness in a meditative state. Love, giving, doing your practice and serving others joyfully. Unity, this wisdom that comes when you feel that interconnectedness on the dance floor or in your community. And respect, being kind, practicing ahimsa, watching your actions of body, speech, and mind to create a better world for all the people around you. So we want to live in the world where our minds pull together these molecules on our membranes into something beautiful and harmonious. We want every moment of our contact through every sense to be beautiful and harmonious, and we have the responsibility over that because of these teachings. And it should be very encouraging. And it doesn't mean that you have to give up the experience of going out and just like losing yourself in music. It's part of the practice. And
the qualities that Claire was ascribing to plur, peace, love, unity, and respect, are known as the 6 perfections in Buddhism. It's the same thing when you see people acting out in this beautiful state. Then naturally, when they're that happy, in that ecstasy, are naturally wise. They're 2 sides of the same coin, Buddhism says. So they're acting out these 6 perfections, and they're called perfections because they're perfectionizers. If you practice them, you can reach that state all the time. So, you know, we're talking about karma here at the end of the day, that your world is created by habituation, which is exactly what Daniel Levitin said about sound. You know, it's the way we pull together a perceptual whole from those composites is habituation. You could relate that to, in the same way with all the senses. In a way, what the Art Sutra has been about is helping us to realize that all the senses work in this way. That we pull together perceptual wholes of all the senses according to our habituation. So if we change our habituation to a positive one in the way that we think, the way that we speak, and the way we act toward others, we can reach that state of ecstasy all the time. So the texts say. So I think we should just wrap it up.
do some music.
Yeah, let's play some music. Let's dance. Let's sing. Thank you very much for coming. So we'll take a brief break, and we'll get everyone on stage who needs to be, and they're arriving in droves. And yeah, so maybe grab some snacks if there's any up at the table. Don't all rush at once. Remember our plur.
No elbowing at the